This is actually very important. This is a year I'm really going to hammer on that we need to shift agile from viewing it as a complex adaptive system where we don't have a set of principles we have to attend to. A lot of people agree with that, but a lot of people don't. Jeff Sutherland has recently come out with a book called First Principles of Scrum or Principles of Scrum, and they're not really. What they are is a set of discussions about the world, society, how things change. And then and those are theories, those are first principles about the world, but we're not doing world. We're not involved in wars and things like that. Although maybe by creating wealth, we can contribute to that. Instead, what we're trying to do is build value for our customers. And there are a lot of different degrees of complexity in that. Understanding the market's very complex, things of that nature. Yes, a lot of complexity. There's not as much complexity, however, at just what the workflow is. What should you do? It's actually been figured out, and it's been figured out a long time ago. Don Reinertson in his book, that was, I think, 2009, The Principles of Product Development Flow, laid out 170 or so of these things. Tom Gilb in the 80s wrote a book called Competitive Engineering, where he laid out a lot, and where people who used his approach did uh, large scale projects on time and under budget. This has been figured out. Somehow in the agile space, when we said we're not going to do waterfall, which was a good thing, we threw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. In other words, yes, we threw out that we can figure out everything. We threw out the schedules, but we also threw out the theory, the idea that there is a theory. And we see a lot of nonsense in the agile space. And I think this is the core why. So this year to me is my goal is if I don't do anything else but get this idea that we have a theory we have to attend to, that we have to take an engineering success, an engineering approach for success, hence the name of my company, Success Engineering, then I will have accomplished a lot. I hope to accomplish a lot more, but that is my main goal here. And I'm not saying that engineering is like civil engineering, rather. Civil, it's not like that at all. I mean, that's a part of it. That's one aspect. I'm not going to talk about engineering today. That might be another topic for the future. But the point is, there is a set of theories and understanding. And I don't mean theories like making it up, which is kind of interesting because, again, Scrum, which says it's based on empiricism, and doesn't talk about theory, actually has a theory that if you follow its preordained practices, you'll have success. And that's all it is. It's a theory. There's a lot of evidence it doesn't work. Stock market people who say buy low, sell high also have an approach that if you buy low and sell high, you will make money. But how do you do it? Can you do it? What's the best way to do it? How do you guide yourself? So that's what today's about. And uh, I'm going to be this is me. I think y'all know me by now, or you can have seen it. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I've been around a long time. I was in the early days when the late 90s, when we were talking about all sorts of things. We didn't have a name for Agile. And I was even at Snowbird 10. I wasn't at the original Agile Manifesto, but I was invited back 10 years later because David Anderson and I had formed Lean Kanban University, and that was obviously having an impact on the Agile community. And people bandy about what Agile is now, but let me tell you, back then, which was 12 years ago, more than half the time since the Agile Manifesto was done, we couldn't agree then what Agile was. Okay. We had about 23 people, I think, and about half of them were new and about half of them were at the original Agile Manifesto. And I remember I've got this vision in my mind. It's funny, I can see all of us standing around in groups of two and three, where the groups of twos and threes and some by themselves were those people who agreed with each other. So David and I were next to each other because we were Kanban, and there were two or three Scrum folks over there, and there were a couple of people over there. So this notion of what Agile is just a catch-all. To really, it just means interactive, incremental, integrated approach. And Scrum is a vanilla flavor of it, but it has manifested its thought throughout the space. And I think this is incredibly damaging. And I don't want to get into that aspect in the middle of the talk, but certainly we can talk about that later. I think it's a very problem. So in a nutshell, you want this. This is part of the driving force. You want consistency in how teams work together. You want consistency in objectives. how they work. You need this. This is why a lot of people say we're going to do scrums, why we're going to do safe, because I need this consistency. But you also need teams to be able to work in a way that works for them. In other words, you can't have immutability practices because at the team level, at the different components level, and when I say teams, I don't mean development teams, I mean any kind of team, product management, whatever. You need to have a structure where people can work together consistently, but enable people to work in their own way that suits their context, their environment, that I call fit for purpose. And this is basically what Amplio provides. And this is very essential. So that's why this talk is important in my mind, is because we need to solve this problem. The idea that, oh, it's too complicated and complex and all this, and therefore we have to have this standard structure and people figure it out, is just not true, and it's very expensive. Okay. So we do have this quandary. These two things I said we need seem opposed to each other. And they are when you don't know how. I mean, there's no question. This is not an easy thing to figure out. It's not an easy thing to describe, but it is possible and it has been done. At Net Objectives, we did this a lot of ways and a lot of times. The difference, I think, now is when I studied Net Objectives, what we did there from 2006 to 2019, I think it was when I went to the PMI, I studied how, although everybody in Net Objectives was kind of doing it differently, I felt there was a common attention to purpose and objectives, and how could we solidify those? How could we identify those? So that's the key. And we need to overcome this quandary. And to do this, we're going to talk about how to overcome it, how we do this. And then so these first 4 steps are going to be me mostly talking. I don't want you to ask questions about how do I do this or how do I take that. We don't have time to go into that today. We can do that next session that we have. But if you didn't understand something, then ask me. If you disagree with something, wait until we get to the Amplio Foundations, because there's going to be an exercise where I demonstrate how theories can be used to teach. So I think you've seen a little bit of this before, but I've expanded it. This is built off of a talk I did at the Enterprise Architecture Group. I'm not sure I'm getting their name right. But this board will be the board when I talk about this certification model. Now, you don't have to get to the certification if you don't want to, but you can use the board and learn all that's available in it. And the Amplio Foundations is basically what I think is the core of what's needed to truly understand what to do. And the fact that the existence of something like this is denied doesn't mean it's not available, because I'm going to actually show you that, how to do it and how you can demonstrate that it's a good thing. Okay, so here's where we're going. So I'm going to talk about first principles, factors for effective value stream, systems thinking, and we have exercises for all 3 of those. By the way, this will be a demonstration of a different way of teaching than I commonly see, which is that instead of teaching by talking example, and then you can't figure it out or understand it until you do it in the future, I suggest, actually, more than suggest, I assert, I'm going to try to give proof of that here, that if I present a theory that relates to some of your past experience, then when I mention that theory, you can use your past experience to prove it or disprove it. You can't ever prove theories, but to validate it or invalidate it. And in that process, you don't need future experience. You literally use your past experience to understand something and to see how things make sense. Now, this is a powerful training technique, and the value of it means that you can train people where they don't have to follow until you understand. They don't have to follow until they get some of their own experience. They have experience. This lack of using people's experience in teaching costs billions of dollars because it makes training so ineffective. And that's another thing I'm not so happy about. You can tell I got a bit of a charge on this. And it's because we're literally harming millions of people with this perceived notion that we can't figure out what's going on. And by the way, there's a real irony here. Much of the damage that's done, many of the mistakes that are done, are very simple things. Somebody says something to somebody and they misunderstand. It's just 2 people talking to each other. But that slight misunderstanding causes what's called a nonlinearity, a nonlinear thing. Some little thing makes a big thing. I'm not going to talk about that, but I have videos of that already, or if they're not out there, I'll put them out. I've done them before in the Amplio system. So anyway, here goes. So Immanuel Kant says, experience without theory is blind, theory without experience is a mere intellectual play. So I want to be clear. I'm not just talking about theory. Like, oh yeah, if you do this, that'll happen. No, I don't know what that is. That's conjecture. That's intellectual play. Deming says it a little bit different. Experience teaches nothing. In fact, there's no experience to record without theory. Without theory, there's no learning, and that's their downfall. People copy examples and then wonder what is the trouble. They look at examples, and without theory, they learn nothing because the examples are very specific. It's like learning addition with a math table. As long as it's in front of you, you can figure out what to do. But once you go outside of the numbers that are presented in the table, you can't do anything. Theory is like using math and learning how to add. It's a procedure that tells you. Okay. So all Agile is not the same. Moving from waterfall to Scrum was a good thing, or the generic Agile, I'll say. I just as epitomize mine. I'm going to suggest that the difference between flow, lean, theory constraints, and Scrum is no less than the difference between waterfall and Scrum. We have advanced a little bit, but there's way more to advance. Because what happened is, yeah, waterfall didn't use empiricism. Well, who doesn't use empiricism now? I admit I'm a little charged because people keep telling me, oh yeah, Scrum is based on empiricism. Like it's a good thing. Not without theory. It's not a good thing without theory. So we want to move up here. This has been around for a long time. I really do need to take a breath. I can understand I'm so charged on this because I just see the damage of it. I see so many people who are troubled. And then when people have trouble, people say, oh, they weren't motivated. Oh, they didn't read the Scrum guide. Oh, they're just not paying attention. Do you notice how that's blaming people instead of looking at what has been built? I think that's actually irresponsible. By the way, I hold this standard up myself. When you see things wrong with Amplio, and there's no doubt there's a lot out there, I see some of you out there in my ACE program who've pointed this out all the time. I course correct, I change it. When things are misunderstood, it could be because they were just misunderstood, or it could be simply because I am wrong. So lacking theory causes lots of problems. You need it to adjust practices. There are no universal practices. Without theory, practices have to be preordained. Well, we don't like that. With a set of core practices that can be adjusted with theory to become fit for purpose. I'm not saying we don't have practices. I'm not saying you don't start with practices. You can start with Scrum for all I care. In fact, it's not a bad starting point as long as you have the theory to adjust it as you have troubles with it. And maybe you can find something that takes less motivation and something that is more apt for you. So it takes less effort. Doing the right thing takes less effort. Doing the right thing takes less motivation. The diet industry is going to be out of business when somebody finds out something that tastes like chocolate cake, but has a balance of protein and fiber in it and is extremely healthy without causing glucose spikes, because it will take no motivation to follow that diet. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist now, but you get the point. So this is our quandary. Needs to be consistency of intention across the organization. This is absolutely true. You can't have people working in different ways and expect them to collaborate with each other, or you can't have different intentions and objectives. But when multiple components of the organization, when they have the same, they must be able to decide how they can work efficiently themselves. So it's this, how do I work together, but how do I decide myself how I work? That's the issue, okay? So we need aligned people with the goal of maximizing value for stakeholders, okay? People can communicate well with each other this way because they have the same terminology. They have the same intention. We can resolve conflicts. This enables people moving from one team to another in an efficient manner. Oh, this is interesting. See, I'm not saying the teams will work the same way. They may not, but they'll be dealing with the same issues. And in fact, if you use things like Kanban boards that explain how you're dealing with the same issues, you can move from one team to another with very little extra effort, because the Kanban board would explain how the work is done. This is visibility, is not just of the work, but visibility of how you're doing the work. By the way, this is the biggest difference between Kanban and Scrum boards, is one shows where the work is, the other one shows where the work is and how you move from one to the other. Scrum over the last 15 years has been slowly moving more toward a Kanban board. But you go back more than Kanban came out, Scrum boards were simply, your sprint backlog, to do, doing, done. That was it. And nobody had anything else. And Kanban has influenced that. I think Net Objectives had a big influence on this as well, because we talked about this. When multiple components of the organizations have the same intentions, each must still be able to decide how efficiently to achieve these objectives. That's the statement we want to do. So, of course, the question is, well, sounds great. How? Well, it's not that hard. Well, it's more than just ad hoc, but it's really, really not that hard. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I think this is very, very important. And when you know how to do this, then things become easier because you're not butting heads. Notice resistance would go away if people can work in a way that works for them. So we've got to create a big picture of how people efficiently collaborate with each other while enabling them to choose their own local, efficient methods that best contribute to the whole. This is my claim. This is a known way of doing things. It's not only a known way of doing things, it predates Agile. Tom Gilb's Competitive Engineering. The book came out, I don't know how long ago, but his Evo system was in the 80s. And he had great success. He's still alive. He still has great success when people work with him. It's just amazing how it's just been kind of ignored. I didn't know of him really until a few years ago. I guess I'm as guilty, but once I came across him, I was like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. Okay, so what we need to do is what's needed to do to get around the quandary I talked about. First, we need this common vision. And my suggestion is we do it around the needs of key stakeholders. I don't mean stakeholders in general. Yes, we have to attend to them. But who's funding the projects? These are what I mean by the key stakeholders. What are their values? What's their success criteria? Minimum business increments are the kind of middle ground. I just threw that in there. That's a concept we talked about before. Different parts of the organization need to know how to relate to each other. This is that common thing we've got. This is just laying out what I've said a little clearer, okay? A method for designing which part to work in the most effective way. I mean, each part of the organization. In other words, how does the development team work in their situation? How does product owners team work in their situation while they still work toward the common goal, the common vision we have? How do we do this? So, I'm thinking of a target. So first thing is we need to state the current top level objectives to achieve the common vision. For example, find the values and success criteria of key stakeholders. By the way, I'm going to get into these. I'm just laying out where I'm going. Each organizational component needs to contribute to these top level by defining their strategic objectives. In other words, product owners don't work the same way as developers. Portfolio management doesn't work the same way as development. Each has their own strategies, but within the common vision. This is what we're talking about. We also recognize there are different ways to achieve strategic objectives. In other words, if I'm in the PMO, I can see what the stakeholder values are, where my executives are. Well, how do I achieve their values, their success criteria? Well, there are a lot of ways to do it. So what we're saying is, even in going after the target of the government, excuse me, of the company, we can have different strategies. Okay. We can choose how to do this by most effectively using first principles guidance and the factors for effective value streams wrapped up in systems thinking. That's what the Miro board is going to do. It's actually going to teach you these 4 things. Now, I will admit, I mean, not admit, but this is the plan today. I'm going to spend about half the time giving you this background. Then the board is going to be there, and I'm going to mostly introduce you to it. You'll try it out. I'll show you the 3 levels. And then it's going to stay out there for you to use over the next several weeks. Okay. And basically what this board might grow a little bit, but to me, the board now is reasonably what these Amplio Foundations are. So I think you'll, that's the whole idea is that, that at this point, you can study that and therefore get to know the stuff in depth. Okay. So the components have to be aligned, properly led. Current top level objectives must be met. This requires coordination, basically, and feedback. And this is designed for complex systems and has been proven to be effective at all scales. By the way, this little bit I just went through comes from a conversation I had with him yesterday. He and I talk a couple times a week. If you can all mute if you're not going to talk, there's some background noise going on. Or I'll have to mute everybody, I suppose. No, good, just fix it. Thank you. Uh, so I just want to acknowledge him. I mean, I was driving this, but he's an amazing guy when it comes to making things clear and precise. Okay. So Amplio Foundations have these four pieces to it: systems thinking, first principles, guidance, factors for effective value streams. Now, we've talked about these already. I'm going to introduce them again, but I'm going to do them lightly because they haven't been discussed, and the boards will illustrate it. So the foundations are, I want to build something on it, okay? So I go over systems thinking because it's so important, even though most of this has been done in some Amplio presentation. I'm not sure I have it up on the website, but I'll make sure I get it up there, the recording. It is on the Amplio COP library. You can find the recording of the bigger section than this. So when Drucker talks about culture eats strategy for breakfast, what he's saying is the culture is basically the system we find ourselves in. And Deming says a bad system will beat a good person every time. Sorry, that's from Deming. Deming attributed 94% of the errors or challenges that came up due to the system, not due to the people. So systems inform the lessons of systems thinking in a nutshell. Systems inform, that means creates behavior. What you see is the behavior the system was designed to create. The problem is it wasn't always intentionally designed to create this behavior. It's just what happens when you do this. For example, imagine you've got developers in one part of the world and testers in another part of the world. You will get certain behavior in how those two groups interact with each other. Or if you have developers who are contractors and don't have an incentive to be long-term committed to things, you will get different behavior. Now, that behavior may not be what was wanted, may not be what was intended, but it's what that system design creates. And we have to recognize that. So it's not like, oh, we didn't create this for that. I don't care if you intended it. That's what you got. And that's, to me, the essence of empiricism. Look at what you're getting, not what you thought you should get. In fact, that's the big irony to me, is that when you create a system with preordained practices and they don't fit, the evidence is they don't fit. You can't say, well, they're doing it wrong. No, that's the behavior you get. We have to attend to the interactions between components because changing one component, changing how product management is done will affect everything downstream in the value streams. In fact, when something goes wrong, this means look to the system first, not to the individual. Okay, there might be exceptions. January 2nd on the manufacturing line, maybe the fact is people will start making mistakes. But then again, it's the system of it's the day after a holiday. I was just kidding because people might be hungover still from New Year's Eve. But even that's a system. No, that might happen. Local optimizations don't necessarily improve the whole. In fact, I've written posts and I've seen where sometimes getting a team started up with Scrum or any agile method can actually hurt the organization because you've solved the local problem and now think you've solved the global problem. And this is especially true because a lot of Scrum aficionados say that's what you do. Scale up. You start with teams and then you go up. Even SAFe says that. That turns out to be wrong because the problems at team level are different than the problems across teams. So solving the team level problem doesn't mean you're going to solve the cross teams. I'm not saying you don't start with teams, but don't think you've solved an across team problem. Yet this isn't discussed in the Agile space. Getting teams up in isolation may help or not help. You don't know. I find they tend to, it depends on the leader of the transition. If they recognize this, it's usually help because you learn something, but then you don't hold on to it. Okay. There's a lot here that's also discussed in Christopher Alexander's Timeless Way of Building and How You Design Systems. I just wrote an article. I didn't write an article. I wrote a chapter in Paula Stewart's in my book that's now in final review over the next 4 weeks. It's going to be available on Amazon February 1st. But I talk about Alexander's approach. I'll post that because those of you who are interested in how to do large-scale design of systems, I don't mean knowledge work. I mean, in general, timeless way building is the best. I'll put that chapter out on LinkedIn. Okay, I've just made a note here. Okay. Okay. Russ Akoff, I love how he talks about systems thinking. You got to have the right solution to the right problem. Most of the time, we're solving the wrong problem. It isn't how teams work together. It's how cross teams, cross components of an organization work together. We have to look at what is feasible. If we're told we can't do this, we won't solve this. Rarely improve an organization by improving the performance of one or more parts. Okay. He talks about systems defined by the relationships, like a car isn't its pieces put together, it's the car and how the pieces relate to each other. He talks about if you take the best parts of the best cars and put them together, you have a pile of junk. They won't even fit together. So trying to optimize things individually won't work. By the way, this was the essence of lean. Lean recognized that mass production of improving this step and this step and this step and this step, it delayed feedback, caused all sorts of problems. And then what you needed to do is take an integrated approach. Okay. Hardness exists, agility exists in the system in a whole. Now, this was not so much my inspiration for this foundation I'm talking about. I'd been looking for this for years. But I will say this. From 2006 to 2019, I was always this close. It was like I'd get asymptotically closer. It means every time I'd get a little bit closer, but I can never, I'd get less closer. I'd get half the way there, and then halfway to halfway there, and then halfway again. And it's like, oh my God, I was just so frustrated. And then I read the choice, and it was like it all fit together. So I've been struggling for this, but that last inch came from realizing that there are a few elements, the root causes. Now, I like to call them actionable causes because the root cause may be your mom dropped you on your head when you were a child and now you don't trust women. Who knows? I'm being facetious, but I'm also being honest. People have stuff like this. People, it's weird. The way the human brain works is weird. It remembers trauma and then associates past events with the current events that are totally unpredictable. So I don't want to go into root cause. I'm quoting him. I prefer to call it actionable cause. And I've written several examples of where there were 2 or 3 causes, but you take the actionable cause, the one that's most value for the least effort. Note he didn't say you can see these. This is the interesting thing. You don't see all of them, but you can discover them. That's in complex systems. You don't see all these, but you can discover them as you go. Okay, how about this? We're already at the board. So let me give you, you can't get there because I didn't send it to you. But I will put it in the chat. Here's the board. I do have this ready to go. Let me share it. Make sure I have access because sometimes I forget to do that. Copy board link. Okay. So put it in the chat. Give everyone a minute to get there. Don't do anything yet. I'll give you 30 seconds to get there, and then I'm going to explain this board. Okay. First of all, remember if you're new, look at my screen for a minute. Remember if you're new and you come in looking like this is hard to navigate. Okay, you can navigate, you can pull back by pinching your fingers, you can expand, you can move around. But it's a lot easier to click this little guy that says open frames, get this. And now we've got all these frames. And this makes it nice to navigate. See, I can run around here and see how I'm clicking down there. This is very cool. Now, I'm not going to go through this whole board. This board is intended to be used to navigate and learn Amplio Foundations, okay? And there's a lot of heading stuff because I've actually used this before. I'm going to show you the part I'm most interested in, okay? So why don't you kind of stop fooling around a moment? That's good that you're on, but pay attention to me on this because this is important. This is going to show you. I'm going to lay out first. I'm going to lay out the 3 main components of the board. This is a place you can come and study anytime. This is available 24/7. And it's a place where you can leave comments. I'm not expecting you to agree to everything here. In fact, I'd be shocked. I've used this a little bit. I get a lot of disagreement. And that's good because that disagreement is a learning opportunity for 3 reasons. In fact, this, by the way, is what I do when I go into an engagement. I always tell people, I said, look, I'm coming in here and I'm going to make a lot of assertions. Actually, I have two little speeches I always do. Well, I don't know which one I start with. I guess it depends how I feel that day. But this is one of them. Definitely relates to the sport, and then I'll give you the other one. I said, look, I'm going to say a lot of things. This is what I actually do in a training workshop. I'm going to say a lot of things. These are called assertions. In other words, I'm saying this is true, and I'm saying that I have evidence that it's true, but I'm not going to give you the evidence. I want you to give me the evidence. Now, if you have evidence, then you believe it's true because you have evidence that what I said is true. If you disagree, if you have something that says I'm wrong, then I want to know about it. Why? Because, well, maybe you misunderstood. Maybe I said it badly. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you have something to learn. And in the conversation about why we disagree, that's where the real learning takes place. See, if I say something and you immediately know, that helps, but it's not as good as when it's something new or it's something that challenges. So we're gonna do that here. We've got this set up to do that. Now, by the way, when I go into an engagement where I'm coaching, I do it a little different. I do that too, by the way, but I add something to it. I say, look, I've got a lot of experience here. I've worked with hundreds of companies over my career, but you have more experience with your company than I will ever have because you got a head start. Experience is always cumulative. So you know more about your company and what's going on. I know more maybe about experience and stuff just because that's been my business. It's not that I'm smarter. I've just been around a lot. I've seen what's learned, what's worked. I've worked with hundreds, thousands maybe of people, talked to them at conferences. So it's the combination of this overall view and then how do they apply. I said, look, we're going to work together. We'll take your experience with your company, my experience with general knowledge, and we'll blend together and come up with a solution. Okay. So let me just navigate this. This is a place to start in the sense that this is Goldratt stuff talking about From the Choice, another one of my top 4 books to read. The Choice, Time You'll Survive Building, and The Obstacle is the Way, which is more about a thought approach to solve problems. It's actually a book on Stoicism. And then I guess Don Reinertson's a close fourth, Principles of Product Development Flow. It's brilliant. So this is the background. You don't have to read these right now. The exercises, we'll go through them. There's also these factors for effective value streams. I have them listed here in a little more detail here. You could actually start doing this if you want, but I'm going to go through all the exercises. There are 4 main exercises. I'm going to go through them. It's probably worth giving me 5 minutes, and then you just go through them as you want to. So this is first principles, okay? Now, you could read this, which says them in more example, but you could just come right here. First principle, most of our challenges are caused by the system. That's a suggestion. Okay. Maybe we should do the systems exercise first. I added that, so I put it at the end. So yeah, actually, since that's number 1, let's go down to systems thinking. Okay. Systems thinking. I already told you a little bit about it. This is how all these exercises work. That's just references. That's what I just kind of said. Look, I've got 4 different colors here. Use a green sticky if I say something and you agree with it. Use a red sticky if I say something and you disagree with it. Then this will be a sticky that's been under discussion because I'll respond to these. And this is a resolved discussion. So this is over time. I'm going to look at this board. In other words, if you agree, I'll just leave it there in green. And if you disagree, I'll make comments on it. Okay, you can leave comments. You can make comments back. See, it's real easy to make comments. Let me actually, let's see, you make comments here. The comment icon's not there, but I can hit plus, comment. Bam, new comment. Isn't that cool? So that's how we can have discussions here in the context of what we're doing. So I've got 4 systems thinking. These are the things I said. They inform behavior. You have to attend to the interactions between components. Something goes wrong, look to the system. I'm not saying it's always a system, but it usually is. So when I review the other 3 exercises, come back here, maybe start here, start wherever you want. I don't care. If you already believe in systems thinking, start somewhere else. But that's where this is. Okay. So first principles, same thing. These are the first principles. I just got 9 of them. Go through them. You'll notice that I have the same four colored. This is my convention for having conversations in what I call an asynchronous manner. Okay. Factors for effective value streams. Okay, now this one's a little weird, so I got to show you this. I didn't put them in order. This is an iconic view of Amplio teams. It looks a little bit like Scrum. It's a little bit different at the team level. I have more detail here down at Amplio team. See, Amplio team. I also have this thing called Blast, basic lean agile solution teams. This looks like Scrum at scale, except with more flexibility. I did not copy them. I predated them. I actually, in 2008, implemented this. I just didn't write it up. And then later, when Sutherland wrote up Scrum at scale, I said, oh, wow, this is exactly what I did at a client. Ironically, that was his client. I came in after the fact. I don't think he copied me. I'm not saying that, but I know he had some familiarity with it. And I decided to write it up. So if it looks similar, it predates it. It's not a copy. So what I did here is I just put the factors for effective value streams around it to kind of remind you what's going on. Okay. Then there's one last thing, the fourth thing. And I tell you, let's not get into this. This is up here. You can find it. This is a chapter in the book. I'll put this chapter out on the website to selecting practices. But this is the idea. I'll show you what it is. This isn't set up to modify. This is something you print out and work with the team, but I should make a Miro board for this. These are the 10 factors for effective value streams. And let's say you're doing something. So you mark down, is this helping? And then I have two other options. I could add more if I want, but a couple is more is plenty. And I look at and I see, well, will this new practice help motivate people more? Will this new practice hurt? So you basically, what you're doing is you're looking at what you're doing and the alternatives to what you're doing. It doesn't make the decision for you, but it gets you what to look at. Okay, I'm done with the explanation. So go for it. And I'm here, ask me questions. You can ask on the mic or you can ask in the chat, but go for it. Do whichever one you want first. I suggest strategies, systems rather down at the end. That's systems thinking number 40. Then I suggest going to first principles, which is 9. And then I suggest going to factors 49 and 24. But you do it how you want to. They are interrelated, but you can do it. Okay, so you guys do it, work, ask me questions. I'm going to be here. Now I'll pull up the chat. Yeah, cool.
Hey, Al, I have a question.
Yeah, of course, Andrew.
So in terms of going through this again this morning when you were talking about letting the teams work the way that is most efficient for them, what is it that you really need to put in place to avoid them slipping into siloed optimization, which is anti-systemic? Because I mean,
Right.
the whole thing we're trying to do is promote a systemic view, but yet you want to give them the autonomy so that they can choose the efficient way to work. But how do you know when their chosen way is starting to have a negative impact in the overall system?
Yeah, that is such a great question. And I probably need to emphasize that a little bit more. So I'll create a checklist, and I implied the answer, but I'm obviously not making it clear enough. Remember, the driving force is across the teams. So I'm driving from that they have to pay attention to how they're interacting with other people first. So they have freedom. What I need is adding a slide that says they have freedom here. In fact, I'm going to pull it up here where I can add it in here. So as I go, they have freedom to the parts have freedom to do what they want as long as they don't weaken the agreement between the other components they work with. Now, there's some more depth on this. In fact, we've had conversations in the past, and I don't remember if I actually laid this out. A lot of time people like being in their silos. So you've got to talk to them about there is a value to you of being in the silos. So you have to compare the value of a local improvement to the cost of the global interactions. Global costs are not allowed, basically. So yeah, I need to expand on that. That was an implication, but obviously not sufficient.
Well, and I guess the follow on from that, from a governance perspective, is who really rides shotgun on that to make sure that those things are not allowed, and you don't have teams paying attention to what is important to them at the expense of the overall value that the system is trying to deliver.
That's brilliant. Okay, so here, this is the other thing. Governance is not about how the teams are working. It's not like, are they following this? It's rather, how are they doing with the interaction? So this shifts governance to not being, I'm going to micromanage. This is you know, it goes from micro managing to holistic managing. So that's really important.
So then that implies that there's a series of agreements that each team must effectively sign up for if they're going to
That's right.
participate in this actively.
That's right. Yeah, we used to call these guardrails and net objectives. And I think in Discipline Agile, when I went to the PMI, I forget what we called them there. They changed the term, but it was the same idea. So, so what we could add here is need to have an agreement by all parties about how to work together. Oh, this is great. So I'm going to add to the foundations. I'm going to add the guardrails or something close. I've learned a lot since we came up with guardrails at Net Objectives. I'm going to add guardrails to the foundation. This is perfect. By the way, I want to take a pause here. This is not to pat myself or Andrew on the back. I want you to notice what just happened, because this is important. Notice he said something to me about what this whole system was. Notice I did not defend what I said. I asked him what he meant. I actually immediately realized he was right. I didn't put enough in. And out of this interaction, what we got was a deeper understanding of what's going on. This is the essence of coaching. You have to be willing to learn as much as you want them to be willing to learn. Oh, that's such a great comment, isn't it? A coach needs to be willing to learn more, in my opinion, than how much they want the people they are coaching. This to me is the essence of a great coach. Now, I'm not saying this is easy. Sounds great, doesn't it? Wow, that's so cool. That's not easy because you're supposed to know more than them, except that's not true. But we think we're supposed to know more than them. So this can be very threatening. This is something that took me quite a while to get comfortable with, but I've been comfortable with it now for a while. Okay, any other questions? Okay, let me see how we're doing on the boards. Yeah, I'm going to give you about 4 more minutes, and then I'm going to talk about how we move forward. This, like I say, this board's here. This is the Foundations of Amplio worksheet. I'll talk to you about, if you're interested, certification. I can tell people, I can tell you what my qualification method is for that. But I really suggest you take an hour. That's probably all it'll take. It might take a little more. Let's see, we've got 9 questions, 10 questions. That's 19, 23 questions here. If you spent 5 minutes on each of these questions, you'd be done in 2 hours. I suggest you'll never look at the problem again if you spend those 2 hours. Then won't look at it again the same way. You will see, oh my God, I knew more than I thought I did. I know more than people give me credit for knowing. So what is true is you have to learn it on your own, but it doesn't mean you can't learn it based on your past experience. So I can't open up your head and, they don't have the matrix. I don't have a matrix chair yet, I doubt I'll ever have that. Actually, I'm certain I'll never have. But that's where I'm going. That's my target.
Hi, can you,
Yeah, hi,
or
Sergio.
someone share? Hi, can you share the board link, please, in the chat? Or
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, here it is. There we go. That should work. I will put this board link. Well, you should copy it, but I will also put this board link in the Amplio COP space, as well as you can ask questions there. Remember, you can do comments here, but you can also ask questions there. Okay, so you guys can keep working, but I'm going to talk a little bit. And if you have a question, just kind of say something or raise your hand. I'll see the hand and I'll stop talking. I want to say a couple of things I want to say how to use this board for one thing, I guess, in the future, because I think this is important. So as I said, this is out there. This is just going to stay out there. I doubt I'll come up with a new version of it. I'll try to modify this in place because I expect before long we're going to get a bunch of comments. See, like already I see some comments and I see some disagreement, and that's good. Don't be shy. This is where learning takes place. It also helps me write better things like Andrew's comments and questions. Now I'll make the presentation better for the next time. So I take it as a gift when my work is questioned, or how do you do this? That's a gift. That's really what people should attitude. I don't take it as a gift when I'm attacked. That happens a lot too. I don't appreciate that, I admit. But talking about the work is very important. This is coaching on coaching, by the way, I'm giving here. I'm a very good coach. I'm not the best coach I know, but I'm definitely in the top 5% from based on what I know. Probably even better than that, but I don't like to think that. So this is a way to see how other people are thinking. This is a way for you to learn. This is a way to actually try your coaching. Do you see how I don't have to be the only one giving comments? You see somebody disagrees, put in your own opinion about it. Try to avoid, I see some of these big, it's better to have them small. People can zoom in to read them. If you get a few big ones, then it blocks up the space. So I might adjust things that way. But this is an ongoing board. Okay, now I talked about certification. Okay, I want to explain why I'm doing it and what it is. First of all, it's not really that important, in my opinion. If you learn this stuff, if you go through this board and you go through all these pages and you put something there, that will demonstrate to me you know something. Okay, I'm not giving certification just because people did that. It takes me time for that. So what I'm doing is, and some of you have told me you're already interested in, basically, I think I'm charging $195 because that's just mostly to cover my time. What I'm going to do is set up some other boards. I'm going to wait till this solidifies itself, another week or two probably. And then I'm going to set up what I'll call a cohort. In other words, it won't be on this page. It'll be another page that has all of this stuff, and I'll give access to it like 5 or 6 people at a time. So a group, a cohort, as it's called, of 5 or 6 people will get their own private board that looks just like this. And the intention then is for these people to work specifically amongst themselves to demonstrate, learn and demonstrate their knowledge. And they actually, it's intended to be like a self-study group. And then when the group is ready, they can come to me and say, okay, Al, we think we know this, and I'll then certify all of them together as a group. Now, why I'm doing this is a couple of reasons, 3 reasons, I guess. One is I think these foundational theory must be understood to be effective. It what underlies everything. And if you don't understand it, you're just always trying things when you don't have to. Sometimes you have to run experiments with markets, like what will the customer think? What will the market think? But in your workflow now, it's pretty straightforward. We know why delays are there. We know what causes waste. So that's one reason. The second reason is, well, I can't do this for free because this takes time. I know I'm doing the ACOP for free, but that's helping me build a bigger community, and I'm fine to do that. Again, I do have other workshops that you might be interested in taking. Contact me if interested. Look at my website. But the cohort is another interesting opportunity. Knowing what to do is useless if you don't know how to convey it to others you're working with. You all have seen this. You all said, man, I know we should be doing this, but I can't get my manager, or I can't get my teammate, or I'm a manager and I can't get the developers to understand what's going on. It's not useful to know what to do except as an intermediate step to point you in the right direction. So the cohorts are designed to teach you coaching and learning as a group using Miro boards or collaborative boards in an asynchronous learning thing. See, the cohorts do not need to be co-located. They do not even need to be in the same time zone. We are not in a co-located world anymore. Yet much of Agile depends on co-location, and people complain about it. There are actually advantages to not being co-located when you work the right way. I used to, at Net Objectives, I used to have a partner company we called Velocity Partners. I owned half of it, and my partner owned half of it. And he did something called nearshoring, but we also did some offshoring. Nearshoring was we worked with South American companies, so there was only like a 2 or 3 hour difference between our East Coast and their coast. And one company, not with this kind of shoring thing, but one company I remember at that time when I'd gotten interested, this is like 20 years ago, 15 years ago, is that they did offshoring where they had their own people like in Asia, and they were in the United States. And what they did is they set up the people so they can work in like 2 shifts. And they really went really fast. That's different than when you offshore, outsource, and you have a need for communication between the groups, in which case it's very inexpensive. So those are the 3 reasons. We got to learn it. The cohort's a great way to learn it. And the cohort's a great way to learn how to learn in this environment. Okay. Any closing comments? Maybe I should look at one of these things here and show you how I'll work with things. But please ask questions. Okay, here we go. Don't people create, wonderful. I love it. Yes, they create the system. So the fact that it's the systems causing the problem doesn't get the people off the hook. They now have to fix the system. Let's see what somebody said here. Yes, that's a good answer, Andrew. And I'm going to add my own. Okay. So whoever whoever put this, you don't have to do this if you don't agree. So in fact, let's come up with a convention. Let's put these comments like this. Let's start with a comment. See, that was Andrew's comment. That's my comments. Let's get a convention. We're going to go down so we can see the conversation. Whoever put this sticky up.
That was me, Al. And
Great.
one of my
Okay.
questions is, I'm in, but I don't have a, an animal attached to me. So
You
I don't
need
know.
an animal. That's okay. Here, just it's okay. You can do this, whoever it is, and now I know it's you. That's great, Karen. What I want the person when we put comments on, then you ask yourself, hey, does that resolve it for me? If it does, make it yellow. If it doesn't, add a comment. You see how we can do this to resolve these questions? We're not here to argue, we're here to learn something. So I should actually add that. When you get a red and a comment, if that resolves it, mark it as resolved. Let me put that right here.
Another thing, I was trying to respond to Andrew, and it doesn't give you the ability to respond.
Just add a new comment. Add a new comment.
Oh, okay.
Oops,
I might have resolved it for one person, but not for everybody, right?
well, I'm saying the person who wrote it, if it didn't resolve it for you, then change it back to red or change it back to yellow and put in your comment why it doesn't resolve it. That's a great point.
Okay.
I can reply to comments, to all of them.
Yeah, you could, I think you can reply to comments, but if you can't, just add a new one.
A new one.
Either way.
But this is a huge problem.
No, it's not a huge problem. Just add another comment.
Yeah, I can reply to the comments too. So it's just at the bottom of the comment.
Yeah, let's see. So if I pull this up, yeah, leave a reply here. You come down here. But even so, you might choose to reply to the comment. You might choose to make a new one. See, and this one is actually should be aren't because that's under discussion, but it's not resolved yet. So yeah, so this is good. I would suggest that whoever put it up there is the person who should resolve it first. But then if somebody else says, well, that doesn't resolve it for me, then let's keep talking about it. This is a conversation by a group. Notice what's interesting is as a group, I could come in here and say, gee, I want to see the interesting conversation. So I'm not going to look at the greens except to reinforce, maybe give me some examples. I want to come in and look at this stuff. This stuff looks pretty good. Now we could come up with a convention on the color of the comment. Maybe what we could do is if you're a person who's trying to resolve it, use yellow. But if you're a person who, well, I don't agree, which is fine. Then on the comment, notice you can change the color of the comments. Do that. So that's another thing we do. So yellow comments will be helping resolution and red comments. And we can come out with what do the blues and all that mean. But you see how this is cool? We could actually have conversations in an asynchronous way, looking at a lot of complex issues. And if we want to, don't forget, a lot of you haven't used this much. So I'm gonna bring up something. Hang on a second. And then we're right at time. And of course, I don't, if I'm coming in with my user Okay, so this is like, I call it test because this is me. I want to make sure I know this is not me as the admin. This is me as just a member. See, on your dashboard, you'll have the community of practice. And I could click this. No, that's not what I meant to do. I can't click this. It takes me into the community practice. But if I scroll down my communities, the ACOP community is where we have conversations that you can do, and it'll tag me that a conversation. I realize what I need to do, and I'll do this within 10 minutes after I get a cup of coffee and this ends. I'll make a discussion place that says Amplio Foundations. So I'll have that ready. Okay, closing questions. We're at the hour. Let me suggest something. I don't believe in authoritarian comments that because somebody says something, it's true, regardless of who they are or how long they've been in business. I don't even believe people like Tom Gill and Don Reinertsen have that right to have that authority. However, I will say that I've disagreed with Tom, excuse me, I don't disagree with Tom too much. I understand his work now. I did disagree with Don Reinertsen a lot when I read his book, Principles of Product Development Flow. And he was gracious enough to talk to me about every disagreement. And I don't remember how many there were. There weren't that many, maybe 10. Anyway, after 10 conversations, I saw he was right in every one of them. So I was 0 for 10 in trying to win a debate, but I was 10 and 0 in learning. And he's just gracious enough. I asked him once, I said, Don, I always learn and you always teach. I asked him, I said, I appreciate it. And I really appreciate you as a friend too. But why do you take the time? Because I wondered about that. I mean, I wasn't helping him a lot. And he was kind of gracious. He said, well, he found me interesting. And he also, I think, I helped him explain things in a certain way. And it's kind of the same thing with Tom Gill, because he's always finding me interesting, but he's usually always right. Yeah, Karen.
No, that's all done.
Okay, great. Okay, then I'm gonna get a cup of coffee in 10 minutes. There'll be a place that'll say something like Amplio Foundations, and you could ask, see, these are general questions. You could put in things, but you can't add new categories. So I'll do that in 10 minutes. I just need a quick break and then I'll do that. So anyway, use this board. Oh, sorry, I got distracted talking about Don and Tom. I'm not saying it's right because I'm about to say this, but I've been in the Agile space for 23 years or 24 years. I consider it started for me when I learned XP in 99. Didn't know what to call it, but that's when I really started thinking about this. I would suggest that this foundational stuff is the most important thing you can learn, bar none. That when you take this attitude, you look at the entire world differently. It's like that first diagram I said. See the difference here between waterfall and Scrum, or waterfall and generic Agile, whatever you want to call it, is that we have to get feedback. We have to do things incrementally. This is a huge mind shift, huge, really powerful. It's why it works in so many places. But from here to here says yes, and we need to understand what's going on. And I know I have some complexity things in chapters. I'll add that stuff if you're interested. But I personally think Knevin and the whole target for the complexity theorists that are out there is a red herring. Our problem is not complexity directly. Complexity hides things from us, true, but it's nonlinearity. It's a little thing makes a big difference. We don't have feedback and it causes a huge difference. That's the problem. A little mistake. Think of the Mars Climate Explorer, I think it was. Imperial versus meters or whatever they call the things, and that crashed millions of dollars down the drain. Small error. Big difference. No feedback to test it. That's the problem. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording. I'm very encouraged by the large turnout we had. I really like this. I get more jazzed to put more energy on when more people come up. So if you like this, if you're learning, please share it with your friends, because that'll get me to even do more. So I'm going to stop the recording.